Hello, solo Beatles fans, and welcome to Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. I am one of your four co-hosts, Tom Hunyady, and you may know me from my show, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. Today, we have a action-filled show today, so we might run a little long, but we're going to try to keep it to as close to an hour as possible. Let me introduce to you my three co-hosts. First, he is the DJ of the great show Every Little Thing that's been running now for over 36 years now, I believe it is. And he's also the co-host of Things We Said Today, my favorite Beatles podcast. He is the one and only Ken Michaels. Ken, hello.
Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody. It just made 37 years.
37 years of Every Little Thing, and you do play Every Little Thing, and I'm proud to say I listen to that show.
Thank you.
So, next up, she is the queen of all Beatles media. I mean, I would hope that you guys all know that by now. She is the author of Songs We Were Singing, Guided Tours Through the Beatles' Lesser-Known Tracks. And is she hatless? I don't know. I can't see anybody. I'm writing blind here right now, so... She is Dr. Kit O'Toole. Kit, how we doing?
I'm doing great, Tom. Hi, guys, and hi, everybody out there. Oh, I made kind of a pun. I didn't mean to do that, but see, on this show, people get it.
People get it. All right. And last but certainly not least, he is the author of the George Martin bios, Volume 1, Maximum Volume, Volume 2, Sound Pictures, and a special announcement coming up real soon. He is the one and only Dr. Kenneth Womack. Doc, how we doing?
Doing great. Good to see you guys.
It's a pleasure as always. Like I said, we are going to have a action-packed show. We're going to recap the Fest for Beatles fans. We're going to get into the discussion that my three co-hosts had since I wasn't able to make it. But first, here's the one and only Ken Michaels with the latest and greatest. Ken, as always, take it away.
Well, I thought we'd start off the show by making the big announcement, as you were just hinting, Tom, of, this is the major announcement, the biggest announcement of the week. This is what everybody's talking about all over the internet, and that's Ken's brand new book on Abbey Road. Want to tell us more about that, Ken?
Sure. It's the story of really the last year of the Beatles, mostly the story of the making of Abbey Road in that wonderful summer 50 years ago. It has a few, as you might imagine, flashbacks to key events that brought the Beatles to that place, the kind of political events inside the band, the social events that were affecting them. But mostly it's about the music. And it, of course, tells us about the making of Abbey Road and then takes us into the aftermath and why the Beatles just couldn't push on another day. So I'm very proud. I'm very proud of it. And it's called Solid State because it's about the technology too that helped make the record. And of course, I'm talking about the transistor recording desk that helped make it all happen. Transistor mixing desk, rather, that made it all happen. The 8-track, the whole business that gives it such a different sound, right? That warmth that we also hear on songs like Maybe I'm Amazed, which were made on the same desk. So very happy with it. Alan Parsons wrote a great foreword to kick things off. And of course, he would know better than I anyway. So really proud of it and looking forward to seeing what you guys think.
Okay. Awesome. And that's coming out when? The release date is when?
It's officially October 15th, but you might see it earlier. Of course, you as my special colleagues, you might even see it earlier.
Oh.
I would hope so. Yeah. I should hope so.
Don't tease us, Ken.
Right after the Cats, you're 5, 6, and 7.
Oh, man.
Well, to go along with that is the news about the Abbey Road Symposium that we've talked about before, which is taking place at the University of Rochester. That's the last weekend of September. And you broke the news also, Ken, about there will be a live stream for that.
And that's right. It'll be the conference will be, in fact, the weekend of September 27th this year, and it will be held at the University of Rochester in the Eastman School of Music. Given that town's storied history, of course, with Eastman. and Kodak, et cetera. So it's going to be a pretty exciting time. I understand Andy Babuke will be there. We know him as the scholar of Beatles instrumentation. Also on hand will be Walter Everett, the author of The Beatles Use Musicians, and John Kurlander, whom I will be interviewing, I guess, live on stream. John will be there to tell us about how he saved Her Majesty and more. And of course, those who are on Facebook probably saw John's announcement that reminding us that 50 years ago he was on that session for the Ballad of John and Yoko.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay. So should we talk about the fest first, or should we do more news?
Let's get the news.
Mhm.
All right. Well, some news that broke about a week ago is that there'll be a new film documentary coming out May the 24th at the ArcLight Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles. It's called Echoes of the Canyon. It's about music from the 60s from Laurel Canyon, groups like the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, Mamas and Papas, and the Beach Boys. Ringo Starr is interviewed in the film, as are the surviving members from those groups that I just mentioned. Eric Clapton, Beck, Jackson Brown, Lou Adler, and others are all interviewed. And it's said that the last film interview that Tom Petty gave was in this documentary. Jacob Dylan serves as the narrator. He's also an interviewer and co-producer for the film. And there'll also be an album coming out with Jacob Dylan, Cat Power, Regina Spektor, and Beck interpreting songs from the Laurel Canyon Songbook. So we have that date of May 24th for that theater in Los Angeles. And let's hope that it has a more widespread release in theaters. Also, Paul McCartney is now making available the film, The Bruce McMouse Show, which you can purchase as a download or you can rent it. It's now available on iTunes. And as we all know, it's part animation, part live concert footage of Wings from their 1972 European tour. While it's not confirmed, Michael Eavis, the co-creator of the Glastonbury Festival, has been teasing people by saying that he's hoping that Paul McCartney will play their 50th anniversary festival next year. Paul was also rumored to headline this year's festival. And we all know that he played Glastonbury back in 2004.
Right.
So let's hope that he does it next year. And we were talking about this in our last show, not the one from the fest, but Paul did indeed play back in Brazil, and also in Chile. I think he did not play it in Argentina when I looked at the set list. Paul doesn't start his tour of the U.S. until May 23rd in New Orleans. But good to hear that he did play back in Brazil there. I have a feeling he's not going to do it when he comes to the States.
Yeah, probably not.
Sorry to hear about the death of Johnny Hutchinson, who was one of the greatest of the Merseyside drummers. He was the drummer for the band The Big Three, considered one of the finest of the Liverpool scene. When the group disbanded, Johnny gave up his music career for good. Johnny is said to have despised the Beatles as people and as musicians in all their time together. Johnny will always be remembered for standing in for the Beatles, for the drummer at the time, Tommy Moore, when they had an audition for Larry Parnes. He also played with the Beatles right after Pete Best was fired from the group, just briefly before Ringo arrived. And there's a quote from him where he says, "Brian asked me to join the Beatles, and I said I wouldn't join the Beatles for a gold clock. There's only one group as far as I'm concerned, and that's the Big Three. The Beatles can make a better sound than that, and Pete Best is a very good friend of mine. I couldn't do the dirty on him."
Nice. He was very colorful. There's no doubt about that.
That's for sure.
But
you know what? I would leave all of you for a gold clock. Or individually.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
A lot.
I didn't mean you, Ken. But
Oh, okay. Got to single me out there.
The Kens must stay together.
That's right.
That's true. We're locked together.
That's
I
right.
like that. I guess you guys know about this, but the Beatles recording of Help is now being used in a TV commercial for Google.
Yeah.
A lot of people are upset about this, and we can all go back to the late 80s when there was a lot of controversy when Revolution was used in a Nike commercial on television. But I think what a lot of people are upset about is the fact that it's the Beatles' own recording. There have been a lot of covers of Beatles songs that have been used in Beatle commercials, but not their own recording of their songs. And I can't remember, other than Revolution, when it's happened except here.
Mm.
But how do you guys feel about that? Just curious. The fact that a Beatles recording is actually being used, the actual recording from the Beatles in a TV commercial. Does it matter at all to you?
Well, I mean, I don't love it. I mean, I will admit. But I guess it's just sort of inevitable. I mean, there are so many iconic songs that are now being used in commercials. It's amazing how, I mean, remember back in the 80s when Revolution, was used in the Nike ad, as you said, and I mean, it was scandalous. I mean, it was such a huge controversy, and eventually it was taken off the air. That stigma seems to have largely gone away, because I mean, I've heard Stones songs, I've heard many others in the original recordings, and you don't hear the blowback like that like you used to with the Revolution commercial. So while I don't love it, at least it's not for toilet paper. Then something like that, then I might be a little more upset, but for Google, that's not so bad.
All right.
Yeah, Ken, I think you said it best on that on your latest and extra long episode of Things We Said Today, where you commented where if the younger generation hears that song and they like it and they go out and they buy Help, and then it leads them to getting that the album Help, and then if it leads them to getting the rest of the catalog, then I say for that reason, then great.
Sure. Ken, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm still back on. At least it's not for toilet paper. That's why she's the queen. I mean that those gems just roll out of that mouth.
Yeah,
first class all the way.
Yeah,
it must be the scribble on her paper.
Yeah,
I agree. In the 80s, it did seem preposterous when the Revolution ad appeared, but I think the Beatles have achieved blue chip status in so many other ways at this point that an occasional commercial like that wouldn't bother me.
Right.
In fact, my gosh, I mean, the difference between now and what year was that? 87 when that occurred?
Around there.
Yeah, is just so different, right? Because of the proliferation of so many different formats and ways to, move content around the internet, and it just seems like a minor thing at this point. It was jarring because it's such a rarity, but and it was done in good taste. I've heard. In fact, I was in the city yesterday, and a fellow I was with mentioned that he thought it was done pretty well, and he liked it.
Right.
So
it really works in this context because you need Google to help you find information. And they even have the front cover of the Help album towards the end for a split second. And I believe at the very end of the commercial, it says, "with a little help."
Yes.
From Google.
Yep.
So, there's
we have
so much competition out there.
Yep.
What's that?
We have a viewer question. Who do the royalties go to for that these days?
Well, they go to the same people they always have.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, ATV, Sony ATV, whatever we're calling them these days, they're the agent.
Yep.
And as the agent, they get a fee, but of course the rest of the money's going right to the Beatles and their heirs. And every year they get together and divide the spoils. So for the most part, it's going to the Beatles and their heirs, and Sony ATV or whatever we're calling them. I should know this. I think it's Sony ATV.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And they get their cut, and that's how that works.
But in addition to the music publishing end, there's also songwriting royalties, which is a completely different thing. And I would believe that.
Well, that's what I was referring to.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So they make money as well.
Right, and then you also, let's face it, what's the benefit for, Beatles and company? It is the fact that people are then going to go out and buy Help, and Help is available on a number of compilations. It is available on as the title track, as you were mentioned earlier, of the Help album. So, it's a good gateway song into the Beatles content world, which is the finest world there is.
Right. Well, as I've always said, in order for a catalog to thrive, you always need young people to discover it.
Sure.
And there's so much competition out there that to get old music played, there are people out there that are paid to try to get songs in commercials or in movies or in video games. And if the music gets introduced to young people that way, I'm totally for it. So.
Absolutely. And, we have a great lesson on this. The Beatles, of course, have never really ebbed, despite a few moments in their post-band life. But they rule most streaming organizations year in and year out. If they're not the top, they're close to it. But all we have to look to is Elvis, right? With the embargoing of his music for so many years. Students do not have a working knowledge of the king. And, it's a damn shame.
Right.
Scary.
Yeah. So it's good to be out there somewhere, right?
That's true.
All right. Some other news here. This concerns Lawrence Juber, who was a fantastic guest at the Fest for Beatles Fans. He has a new CD, which is coming out April the 26th. And it's called Downtown, named after the Petula Clark song. And it's a lot of standards with one original. And he did indicate at the fest that he will be working on his 4th CD of Beatle covers. So He's done all that. Plus he did one CD of all Wing songs called One Wing. So terrific arrangements, all on acoustic guitar from Lawrence. Also, there's a bunch of news here on the Beatles Kids that I can run by real quick. Danny Harrison, who just recently announced that he'll be the opening act for Jeff Lynne's ELO for the North American tour, posted last Friday on Facebook that he'll be appearing on Perry Farrell's upcoming solo album, Kind Heaven, which is due out June the 7th. Zach Starkey, this is very interesting, and Sharna Laguz, that's spelled Liguz, they've announced the formation of a new reggae record label, which is called Trojan Jamaica, and they have a new album coming out. They call it a groundbreaking album, Red, Gold, Green, and Blue. Details will be coming soon about that, but just released for streaming and downloading is a new recording of the Screamin' Jay Hawkins song, I'll Put a Spell on You, performed by Michael, that's Mykal, Michael Rose, featuring Sly and Robbie. And the track was produced by Youth, the same guy that worked with Paul for the Fireman projects. And a new video for the song is out, and Zach Starkey is in it, and he's playing electric guitar.
Interesting.
New label there from Zach and Sharna. Julian Lane is releasing the 3rd of a trilogy of children's books due out April the 22nd called Love the Earth, which, like his previous books, Touch the Earth and Heal the Earth, concerns his magical plane, the White Feather Flyer, which teaches children around the world about the importance of clean air and water. It's all about preserving the environment. And he'll be making a bookstore appearance at the Barnes & Noble bookstore on Union Square in New York City on April the 22nd at 7 p.m. He is also scheduled to appear on The View. And I'm not sure. I was given the date April 24th. I've looked online. I haven't had anything to confirm that. But he has been a guest on The View a few times. So it'll be after April 22nd, I'm pretty sure. Should be the 24th. He's also going to be at the Barnes & Noble in the Grove in L.A., making an in-store appearance there April the 30th. And then there's news about Sean Lennon, who, along with the Lennon, the Claypool Lennon Delirium, they're currently touring in support of their new album, which I have right here.
Just
Not the reality. Yes. And for those of you that don't know, when they played in Toronto, Geddy Lee joined them on stage, and they performed Tomorrow Never Knows together.
Interesting.
And they have performed that before. I just got to see them on Saturday night in New Haven at College Street Music Hall. And this is the second time I saw the band. And they performed Tomorrow Never Knows the first time, as well as In the Court of the Crimson King. And fantastic band to get to see. Now, the new CD, by the way, is just the two of them playing everything. And Sean, in fact, plays drums on the album. But this is a full band that you got to see with a keyboard player and a drummer. And Sean does all the guitar work. He does the rhythm guitar parts. He does the lead guitar parts. And it was an amazingly tight band. I really enjoyed the show. I'm getting to know the album better. It takes a while for it to grow on you. If you like psychedelic music, kind of Pink Floyd-ish, kind of King Crimson-ish, I would recommend the CD.
Cool.
And that is the news that I have for you this time.
All right. Very well. Okay, so our one of the main things we're going to talk about today, we're going to recap the fest, which happened March 29th to the 31st, and that was in New Jersey. And my colleagues here, the Kens and the lovely Kit, were able to go, and thankfully you guys did a panel. You guys were wonderful. We watched it on YouTube. Before we get to that, let's hear what else you guys did, because it seemed like all three of you were busy, and it looked like it was a lot of fun as well. So hopefully not only did you do a lot, but you got to see a lot and have a little bit of fun. So Kit, why don't you talk about what else you did while you were there?
Well, I was on a number of panels, obviously Talk More Talk. I was on two historians panels where we talked about Abbey Road, talking about how it looks backwards to their roots and looks forward in terms of their solo careers. We talked about the Get Back sessions on the other panel. I did my Deep Beatles Live presentation with Steve Erickson, and we did three Escher demos. I'm not going to say what they are because we're going to be doing the same thing in Chicago. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, you made my phone drop. Thanks.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I didn't mean to shock you. And,
yeah, okay.
And Ken Womack and I got into a lot of trouble in the author area where we were selling our books and everything. We were just, doing our usual wreaking havoc and, security was called now. But one of the highlights for me was seeing the 3X-wingers play back parts. I wish they played all of Back to the Egg. I'm selfish, and so that's why I'm like, oh, why didn't they play it all? But they played, some tracks on, Spin It On, Old Siam Sir. That was cool. That was really cool. Just great to see them play these, classic tracks live. I mean, stuff you never thought you'd hear live. And so that was really a big highlight for me.
Cool. Very cool. And where was Womack?
Well, I was getting in trouble in the book room, as you just heard. I sure hope Wings goes and does their thing again in Chicago. By then, I'm sure we'll get one of the box sets for Back to the Egg. Yeah, I think we'll probably be on the second one by then. Maybe the second the special egg crate version of it, not the luggage. Anyway, you know what? I thought it was kind of lukewarm at first, but I thought the fest went really well after a while. There was very, very nice crowds on Saturday and Sunday. Mark Lapidus had a lot to be proud of this time out. Just a good vibe. I did a fun main stage thing where I did my George Martin's role in constructing the Abbey Road medley.
I watched that. That was great. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, thanks to the great Albert Ammons, it was. I think I'm just going to make him the only slide from now on, and everything else. I had a lot of fun doing that. He was recurring over and over again. He is determined, even in death, to bring back the boogie woogie. I mean, that's it. So, I did that, and I had a lot of fun with you guys on our panel. I got to see, we all love Kit O'Toole, of course, but I'm here to tell you she is a demon, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, I can't wait for this.
I have a prop. I mean, you play a nice person, Kit.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm just getting a photo here.
Oh my God.
No, oh, there you are. Oh, there you are with a Coca-Cola. That's nice.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that's good. That was, by the way, real cane sugar, right?
Yes, that was a Mexican Coke, which I'd never had before.
Would you say
they're really good?
It was good.
So did you think it tasted better than your normal experience?
You know, just a little bit. I didn't see a huge difference, but there was some. I mean, it was sweeter for sure.
Now,
So, yeah.
look, I'm no expert in handwriting analysis, but I'm sitting next to you during our Talk More Talk panel. I just happened to lean over with my camera, with my phone.
Just happened to.
And I took a photo of this is Kit's writing, and if you can't read it, that's because it's not legible. This is the writing of what a sociopath. Look, there's the word "you," and then there's 33. I can see that.
But see, smart people have bad handwriting. I think there's been a study that shows that.
Yes,
Yeah.
please remind me to
right.
only let you write me prescriptions in the near future because
Yeah, see, smart people have illegible handwriting is the last thing you hear before somebody, a sociopath, kills you. I heard that's why Tom stayed away.
yes.
I scared the hell out of them, I think, at Monmouth.
There's still a lot of releases coming out in the near future that I need to get, so I don't want to die, Kit.
Yeah,
Right.
the buffet was really good this time. As you
Yes.
can see. There you go.
Absolutely.
I have lots of other photos I can share. Here's Kit just sitting there. That was nice. Oh, here's a
See
dog.
what you all missed out on? Yeah.
There's a dog with a Beatles outfit.
Oh my God.
nice.
Was that at the fest?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, I pay attention to what's going on.
I missed him.
Chuck Gunderson, what a guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
great
him.
guy. Nice guy.
This is Jude Shoe.
Jude Kessler.
Yeah.
Jude Kessler, yes, indeed.
That's what I've got. So
All
thank
right. That was a good recap. Very nice.
Fantastic.
Oh, look, here's Jack Douglas getting out of his car.
Oh,
That was nice.
I saw him sitting at the hotel bar at one point.
Yeah, but what I did was stalking.
Yeah, right.
So now,
okay.
all of our viewers feel like they've already been there now.
Yeah.
It really draws you in, doesn't it?
Oh boy.
Oh, anyways, so Ken Michaels, I'm sure you have all of your updates neatly typed on a piece of paper for you to tell us what your experience. So
No, it's all up here, which could be dangerous. No, but really, ditto with what Kit said. The Wings performance was fantastic. And normally, there's Mark Lapidus there. Normally, if you ever see a member of Wings from the later lineup there, the last lineup, you get to hear Rockestra, maybe Getting Closer, but they did half the album. Like you said, Old Siamser, so glad to see you here. Oh my God, they did.
Yeah.
And Lawrence Juber opened singing We're Open Tonight.
right.
Plus Getting Closer, Spin It On. Denny Lane sang lead to Again and Again and Again. And I'm missing some of Ken's photos. I'm sorry.
I know. I'm like, I'm trying to focus on both here.
It's okay. I'm going to get it like a photo feed later for you, Ken.
Oh.
Is it true that they didn't do Arrow Through Me?
No, they didn't.
No, they didn't.
Arrow Through Me is a real tough song to sing because of the wide vocal range in it. But I got to hand it to Glenn Burtnick from the band Liverpool, who's also part of the Weaklings, because he did most of the McCartney vocals, and he's outstanding. The whole band, Liverpool, is really great.
Very good.
And aside from the fact that when they do their own Beatles songs, they do their own concert, they're fantastic. I'm so impressed when they back up the guests at the fest, because sometimes it's not that easy to back up certain artists on certain songs. I just
They
want to
don't come
mention one
easy.
song.
Yeah.
No, but one year Ronnie Spector was there, and they backed her up on Try Some, Buy Some, which is a mother of a song to play. It's very difficult to play Try Some, Buy Some. Lots of different time signatures in there. And so apart from the fact that they're great musicians by themselves playing the Beatles music, when they back up other people, I think that they deserve tons of credit because they do it so well. But other highlights, John Montagna, who's a bass player, who was a guest on Things We Said Today, my other podcast, did a lecture or a seminar upstairs where he showed you Paul's innovative bass playing on the Abbey Road album. And he played it along with the Beatles recordings, so you can hear exactly what Paul was doing and how interesting, how everything gelled on some of the Beatles songs. Bruce Spicer right there.
Yep.
You know what? We ought to get Bruce Spicer to do like a live hookup for us at the McCartney show in New Orleans.
Oh, there you go. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see. Maybe.
We should try and get Paul to do some Venus and Mars stuff in New Orleans. My Carnival.
My Carnival.
Yeah.
Yes.
That'd be awesome.
But John Montagna was great, and you'd have to be there to see it. And he put out one video where he's playing the bass along to something, and you could just tell how the whole band is locked in, especially Paul and Ringo on drums there, and how everything fits in the song. Everything made sense in the way that Paul played it. Also, there were our panels. There was the one that we did for Talk More Talk, the one I did with Darren DeVivo on Things We Said Today, where we talked about how our listeners feel about all these different mixes that have come out of Beatles recordings through the years. Are you in favor of it? Does it confuse people? Is it a good thing? You know, it's a very worthy subject, I think. And Darren was kind of concerned about that because we're not just talking about the Sgt. Pepper and White Album box sets, but going back to the Yellow Submarine song track or Let It Be Naked, you know, Love, which is an entirely different animal altogether. But how our listeners felt about that, how Beatles fans felt about that. And then there was our panel, which was the Beatles media panel, where Wally Podrazik was the moderator. And it was all about, you know, the fact that the internet, there's so much stuff now on the Beatles, and there's so many podcasts in particular. Is that a good thing? Is there too much clutter? You know, what is the importance of podcasts right now, which is a booming thing right now on the internet? I can't believe how many Beatles podcasts there are, and solo Beatle ones too, individual ones like the one you got, Tom, there with Two Legs. But it was a very interesting topic, and the Zombies were there. They were fantastic, being interviewed in the main ballroom, and it was the original Zombies too. You know, and they're going to be touring again. They were just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They hinted that they were going to work on a project with Brian Wilson, but couldn't give any details on that. And Alan White was a great guest as well. So many things. And there was also meeting the fans and talking to them about our shows. I met a 12-year-old fan named Nick who knows everything about the Beatles. Somehow he knows the group music and the solo music. He's telling me things about the solo music, like he actually said to me, Ken, Press to Play is a better album than Egypt Station.
Oh, I love this kid.
He's 12 years old telling me this.
I agree with him.
How do you know all this stuff? You're 12. You know?
Kid, I always like that Tough on a Tightrope.
Yep. Seriously, that
is a great song.
It is a great song.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're going to be talking about that album very shortly.
But I should add one more thing that I really liked that I forgot to mention was, you know, our author tables were near the Apple Jam stage, and it was, you know, kind of cool to see all these different artists, including a friend of this show, Scott Erickson, that we all know. He did some great sets, and there was also Black Rabbit, and I'll tell you, they killed. I mean, when they did Helter Skelter, I mean, I saw people in the audience, and some of them, you know, first generation fans, let's say, like practically headbanging. It was incredible. I mean, the drummer they had was fantastic. So that was another, you know, highlight for me. They were great.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
by the way, Let me just say one thing, because Mr. Mayo wrote to us about the members of the Wings don't seem to know anything about a remastered Back to the Egg coming out. Because I asked Steve Holly about that, and he was not even approached about it yet.
Ooh.
This was only a few weeks ago. So I hope that it's true. I mean, the rumor is that London Town and Back to the Egg are next, but I haven't seen anything to confirm it.
I wouldn't be surprised that it is true, and they won't really involve them. A number of the production team for the Beatles have not been involved in any of these big remixes. Including Ken Scott and all the others. So they probably aren't being consulted. They'll just get a contract.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you look at the Wildlife and Red Rose Speedway box sets, there's quotes from Denny Seiwell in there from a new interview. So I would think they'd be approached. And how can you not approach Denny Lane?
Yeah,
He's there from start to finish in Wings. So.
Yeah, but he's a little cranky sometimes. So
that's true.
Anyways, but go ahead. Anybody else?
No, that's it, pretty much.
Okay, cool. So obviously then the highlight of the weekend was the panel you three did for Talk More Talk. It went over so well. Watched it on YouTube. It was great. Ken Michaels, why don't you just talk about what the topic was, and then we can spend a couple minutes, adding whatever you guys didn't get in, and maybe I'll add in a little thing or two, and then also the
let me get out my notes.
Yeah.
Tom, just read the notes.
Yeah, so that way, then the fans watching can, they can, type down their, what they thought was incorporated into the solo Beatles canon. So Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, the topic was called "Sing the Changes" after the Fireman song, and it really was about the Beatles and their solo careers, how they adapted to changes in musical styles through the years, be it disco, new wave, whatever. Maybe working with hot artists of the time. How did they reflect the different changes going on musically in musical styles from the 70s on up? And we had gotten into the early 80s talking about McCartney 2. I know we did some talk about George working with Jeff Lynne for Cloud 9.
Yes.
But we're pretty much in the 80s right now. And that's where we can pick up where we left off.
All right. Kit, you want to start off?
Well, one of the things that I thought about that we didn't get to cover during our panel was, pairing up with hot artists and duetting. And I mean, that's a time where, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, that was an inspired pairing. I mean, at the time, Michael was the #1 artist. I mean, he was riding high on Thriller. Well, actually, the first duet they did was just as Thriller was being recorded, but after that, then came Say, Say, Say. And I just thought that song in particular worked extremely well because it allowed, Paul to stretch a little bit, brought in a little bit of R&B as well as pop. Their voices gelled very well together. And they, we talked earlier about how putting Beatles songs in advertisements can bring new fans into the fold. Well, that's what it did with me. As I've said before, when I heard that song, I was a huge Michael Jackson fan. And so that made me buy Pipes of Peace. And so, I think it was a smart move on both their parts. Michael then could appeal to, the first generation Beatles fans and, so there were a generation span. So I thought that both in terms of sort of strategic move, but also in terms of the song, it didn't have them. I mean, they weren't rapping, they weren't doing anything that would sound out of character, but it sounded very fresh, and modern, and it became an enormous hit. So, so I think that's another way that we didn't get into as much. We didn't have time in the panel, which is when they've duetted with hot acts of the time, and that's
right.
It worked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and duets were hot throughout the 80s too. I mean, I remember a lot of duets, going into the top 10 during the 80s. But then also with John Lennon duetting with Elton John for Whatever Gets You Through the Night. I thought there was, no other bigger act at that time than Elton John. So, Ken Michaels, what else did you have that you wanted to get to?
Well, I wanted to just bounce off of what Kid said about Paul and Michael Jackson, because I think the two of them, the most important thing is how they sounded together and how good the music was. And they really had great chemistry. And between Say, 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 and I know a lot of people put down The Girl Is Mine because it's too cutesy. But as a duet,
it's L7.
They really work together well. It reminds me of those, duets where each person is answering each other. And, I think it's a well-executed record. I also like The Man. And I know a lot of people say it's way too syrupy, and it is very syrupy, but there is a great example of the two of them harmonizing well together.
Their harmonies were on point, absolutely.
Yeah, and I kind of wish that Paul and Michael did more work together. I think that, there was great chemistry, even on screen. I mean, the Say, Say, Say video was fantastic. The two of them look great together in that video. And then you also have to bring up Stevie Wonder, because, Ebony and Ivory was a #1 hit for 7 weeks. And I also like the duet of What's That You're Doing on Tug of War. But Ebony and Ivory, I always defend that song. It's a simple message. It's a powerful message. There are some people who point to that song as well as the work that Paul did with Michael as the nadir of his career. And I don't feel that way. But how do you feel, Ken?
Well, Ken, it's a sad irony that you have to defend a song about peace.
Yeah. It is true.
I mean, it had to be said.
It's true. Yeah. Yep.
Very sad irony indeed.
Yeah.
If anything, I could say the same thing about Michael that I would say about Stevie Wonder. Stevie is my favorite person in all of music next to the Beatles. And he's like the greatest genius, one of the greatest geniuses out there. If anything, I wish that Paul would have done serious work with Stevie Wonder. Sat down, did 50-50 collaborations. You would have had some of the greatest music ever recorded.
Yeah.
And I do love Ebony and Ivory, don't get me wrong, and What's That You're Doing, which was really just the result of a jam from the two of them. But no, I love those two together. And since Paul and Stevie really respect each other so much, it's a crime that they didn't do more together.
Yeah.
Right.
On the bottom, he played harmonica.
They still could, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
I thought What's That You're Doing was extremely good.
Me too.
I mean, I like Ebony and Ivory fine, but I really thought that was a great riff that they had going.
Yeah, I would have loved to have heard Ebony and Ivory as a full-on collaboration between the two, rather than it, pretty much being done when he brought Stevie in to be a duet.
Yeah.
So, but moving up to maybe the dance scene or the electronic scene, where Paul was experimenting, in the late 70s and through the 80s with, Press to Play. And then he also had that remix with Hope of Deliverance in the early 90s, I believe it was, on the CD single. But I think he was always looking for that, the latest sound. And I think that working with Youth, I think it came to fruition with the Electric Arguments album, and I just love how they blended in worldly music and dance music and all the combinations of instruments on each track, especially a song like Universal Here and Everlasting Now, where it starts off with this that eerie piano sound, and then it moves into this really fast dance track, and then it goes back to this really eerie piano sound. That stuff like that, I think really works. Paul's constantly searching for that latest sound and working with the producer of the time. And I know he gets flack for that sometimes, but he constantly wants to to grow as an artist. And I think that's one of the things that I think has worked with him throughout the years.
Yeah, and one thing you brought up, and this is something we didn't have time to talk about in the live panel, which was, the Paul's incorporation of dance. He clearly has this affinity for electronica and dance remixes. And I wrote an article about this eons ago for Beatles Fan magazine, and I got some, people saying, ew. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, he recorded a number of them, and like I thought the No More Lonely Nights remix on Broad Street was great. I thought it was danceable, but it had added the horns, and I mean, I thought it was a lot of fun. I liked. This is kind of related to dance, but that Twin Freaks.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Freelance Hellraiser. That was great. What they did to What's That You're Doing. I mean, I thought that was a terrific remix. Temporary Secretary. It was a way to bring him in to modern, modern sounds, and great for the club, but also great to just listen to. And I know people who didn't care for it at all and said, what does he think he's doing? But I thought it was a great way to update a sound with those remixes. And I think Freelance Hellraiser did a great job of doing some remixes, but not fooling around with Paul's voice too much. It still sounded like Paul. And, I've always kind of admired that about Paul, his willingness to try, different genres like that. And sometimes
wasn't there, you can see it on YouTube, I believe, some years back, Paul doing a Good Night Tonight kind of avant-garde version that was, first of all, I would just like him to do the old song. In fact, what a great addition that would be in its 40th anniversary year.
Yeah.
But I digress. I'm sure there'll be many versions on the Back to the Egg. The third version, the skillet version, they're calling it. Yeah, you get 2 skillets. It's wonderful. They're no stick too, so that's really nice. I like that he's always been elastic about their music and very comfortable with that. I think the Hellraiser is the best version of that, certainly. I wasn't keen on the No More Lonely Nights, but Hellraiser was exquisite. That was great stuff. I listened to it regularly. I still listen to it.
Me too.
In fact, it is in rotation on my music box.
Yep.
Nice.
Mine too. Yeah, it made me really fully appreciate Temporary Secretary. When I heard that version, I'm like, this is great. I thought that remix was just fantastic. It really made me appreciate that song a lot more.
It occurs to me Temporary Secretary would be a great soundtrack for your handwriting.
Yeah, there you go.
The kind of piercing techno sound.
That's right.
Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Well, I'm glad to hear all of you say this because I'm a big fan of all the dance tracks that Paul's done. In particular, I love when he did Où est le soleil. I think it really works.
And we didn't get to that in the panel. That is a great song.
Mm-hmm.
You like it?
I do. It has an excellent build to it.
Right.
And after we heard Chris Thomas tell us those stories, particularly the ones about Paul in the final stages of rounding out an album and his difficulty in making those choices. And, I don't say that that's a flaw. I think it's just part of him as an artist. You have to wonder, if we could have received more music like that, if he'd let himself go in a direction like that and maybe take that risk. It could have been fantastic.
He has said that he has difficulty picking what he thinks are his best songs because he likes all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do? You take advice from people, and what if you don't agree with them? It's not an easy, decision to make. But the dance tracks that he's done, I'm glad you mentioned No More Lonely Nights. Do you know how clever it is to take the same words that you used in a ballad version and create a totally different song with it?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love about the play out version of No More Lonely Nights.
Yep.
I don't get as much into like when there's 5-6 mixes of the same song, like Où est le soleil. But the album version, I love it. I go for that all the time. And Twin Freaks, it's interesting that you say that because when that first came out, it was way too weird for me. I'm saying, what is he doing here? But most of the songs that the solo Beatles have done, I like for the most part. But there's always those songs that I don't think as much of.
Mhm.
And the thing I like about Twin Freaks is that it takes certain songs that I didn't appreciate that much and gives it a different spin.
Exactly.
Like, for example, Dark Room,
Mhm.
which I don't think is that great a song, but the backing that he puts to that. Actually, one of the most brilliant things on Twin Freaks was, and I love Coming Up. You don't need to improve Coming Up.
Mhm.
But the fact that you mix the backing of Morse Moose and the Grey Goose with Coming Up, who would have thought that? And I'm wondering if this is all the
Hellraiser, that's who.
But you got to have a mind for that. I don't know if Paul even thinks about these things, but it's a brilliant thing. Long-Haired Lady you should check out because they isolate the part where Paul and Linda sing "Love Is Long," part, and you just hear the vocals, and it's really cool, to hear it that way. But there is an art to blending different songs together, what we call mashups. And then a lot of what's on Twin Freaks are not really mashups. They're just taking like Paul's vocals and speeding up the beats to it, or doing something with the rhythm and the beats and giving it a different flavor, beefing it up a little bit and making you hear the song in a different way. And if you've gone to Paul's concerts in recent years, he will, before his concerts, he'll run this music for like half an hour, which is very much like Twin Freaks.
Yes.
So he's expanded on that. There's a lot of Beatles songs that are in there, and there's covers of Beatles songs in there. And I think it's really cool. I stay in my seat listening to all of it.
I do too.
And trying to figure out, has he updated it since the last time I saw him? And, are there things here that I heard the last time? But I really like when he does this.
Yeah. Party is another one that I get into. Trans-spiritual Stomp from the first Fireman album.
That's
I get into.
I like that too.
So
there's what it turns on, and picking up what you were saying there, Ken, is there's so many wonderful moments, right? And they're often just absolutely a great moment of sound that occurs for sometimes even once in a song. It's not even repeated. But his moments are so fascinating and, for lack of a better word, catchy, that somebody like Hellraiser in his DJ guys picks up on those and gives us a very different listen of those sounds.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I can't remember which one it is based upon, but the song La Lula, Lalula. Do you remember that one? That's my favorite one. It's the 10th track.
Right.
It's the 10th track on the CD version I have. I bought the records when they first came out. I had to have it. I just like the cover.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's mainly an instrumental that was new.
Right.
Yeah.
As far as I know. But at the same time, you've got what he did with Live and Let Die was kind of interesting because you kept hearing the same phrase when you were young over and over and over. Right. I don't know if you'd find that annoying or find it interesting. So it's so repetitious with that.
Right.
And then to use a song like Really Love You, which that was good. Don't get me wrong. People are going to condemn me for this because Ringo's on the track, but I always thought Really Love You was the weakest song on Flaming Pie. And by giving it this new arrangement, it made me appreciate it more.
I agree.
Although, Really Love You also has that element of spontaneity to it, which a lot of people like. So
now
Twin Freaks was great.
I love it. Now, a listener this is really funny because I have this in my chicken scratch.
How could we verify that? Yeah, we can't.
But I seriously do. This viewer writes, P.S. Love Me Do is another example of a different approach. Yeah, now that, for me, that's an example of when it didn't work. It sounded forced. It sounded, it just didn't work with those two songs. And that, to me, was an example of being unsuccessful in incorporating a trend. And I think there's a reason that was not released in the U.S.
Perfect segue, because I was just going to bring that up. Is there any moments throughout any of the solo Beatles where you thought they incorporated a genre or a style into their music that didn't work, Ken Michaels?
Not really. We haven't talked about Press to Play, which to me is the most underrated of all of Paul McCartney's solo albums. And what I have found in talking to Beatle fans through the years is that there are plenty of them that are so used to the Beatle Paul and the Paul in the 70s that had a certain style, that had a certain sound, and was very used to it. Not only songwriting wise, but production wise. If you take a look at what Paul was doing in the 70s, with the exception of Back to the Egg, he produced all of his solo music. As the 80s came into play, after George Martin, he started to work with the hot producers of the time. And I think a lot of fans, you've seen it online, who don't want him to try to sound contemporary. They want the old Paul. Just like there are people who will listen to Press to Play and they love Only Love Remains and they love Footprints, but they don't like Talk More Talk. Except the podcast, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
And Pretty Little Head. But I thought that it was so well executed, and it was the sound of the times. And to me, I don't even call it dated, because if this music is constant in your life, it's never really dated. Pretty Little Head, as you and I have discussed many times, Kit, to me it always sounds like a Peter Gabriel track. It could have worked as something Peter Gabriel would have done. Talk More Talk, I think, was done so well, and yet there are some fans who think, who is he trying to be? Phil Collins here? Why can't Paul try to adapt to the sounds of the time if he happens to like it, and it really fits well for him? Maybe instead of thinking about whether or not it works for the artist, maybe the problem is the fan who can't adapt to change. So the same people who can't stand Temporary Secretary, but yeah, give me Waterfalls, give me One of These Days, but don't give me Temporary Secretary or Bogey Music or those songs. They don't want Paul to go too far left field from what they've expected from him all these years. But I admire him for when he has tried. And, I don't think that the Press to Play material, the experimental stuff like Talk More Talk, is that much more different than She's Given Up Talking on Driving Rain, or The Fireman, Electric Arguments, or something like Road from New. It's all very, electronic, atmospheric. It's got that sound to it, and I think he does it all really well.
Now, there are times, though, moving on from Paul for just a second and looking at my notes here. It's another thing, which is George Harrison. Now, most of the time, his songs were very, contemporary. They don't really date, but there were a couple where he used, synthesizers too much. Like Wake Up My Love from Gone Troppo. That I would have liked that song a lot better if they just removed that, because it starts the album out like that, and to me I just think, this is just trying to incorporate a modern sound, kind of similar to Blood from a Clone. Is another one that, and also of course the lyrics are just so it's like, this guy, he is angry, but besides that, I just thought those two songs to me haven't aged as well, and I just felt like he was kind of forcing a modern sound in there, and it didn't need to be there. Just in my view.
Womack, anywhere in the solo canon that you felt was lacking in inspiration or anything like that?
Sure, there are several moments, and what's interesting is they're you might even call them failures at times, but that's okay. Failure is not a bad thing. That's how what is the phrase that we think about now is fail faster. The more times you work on something and come up short, the closer you are to finding whatever your art demands, whether it's sound or visual or video or what have you. So it's I've never struggled with that too much. Sometime in New York City is a low point for John Lennon. He certainly came back from that in fine style. The project probably was problematic from the get-go.
Yeah.
Because it was too political?
No, I don't mean that at all, actually. I like the political impetus for it. Just the playing, but I think about this a lot. There's still people, right? We love them, and they have moments of true genius, but they're people. And so much of what is created with human beings is so contextual, and it's based on whatever's happening to them at the moment. And so you can mirror these careers that we're talking about with the external forces, or rather the internal forces in their lives. And so we spent a lot of time tonight, for one reason or another, talking about Paul McCartney in the 1980s, which is there's a lot of great music there, and music that I adore. I mean, you could make 2 greatest hits albums out of the wonderful music, and many of those songs that aren't even hits, right? That just were flat out great. But having said that, somewhere in there he loses himself in the 1980s, and he had such a big head of steam. Why did that happen? I think that's fascinating. It's not a bad thing. It's just fascinating to me that he does that. And you mentioned a moment ago, Kit, George Harrison, had some tough times there.
Yeah.
Finds himself in magnificent style more than once. But that's what all of this is a journey. And it's the longer you're on the journey, the more kinds of failures you encounter, and that's a very good comment there. About failure and masterpiece. But even if it's a real failure, it's a failure that's going to take you perhaps to the place where you can create a masterpiece. It's quite interesting. Now, of course, the problem, and it's always going to be the challenge with the solo Beatles, right, is that they come after the Beatles. So trying to measure anybody against a musical fusion that goes straight up and then ends in such a magnificent fashion is folly, right? So the most challenging thing for the solo Beatles is Beatles.
Well, I think that because they had to follow the Beatles, it's been impossible for so many people to really assess the solo work. How can you? Just to be fair, if everything has to be measured up against what they did as a band, you might as well not listen to anything else. I mean,
no, that's right.
It's just not fair to do that. But I kind of disagree what you were saying, Ken, about like the mid 80s with Paul. I think that from Press to Play on, like Press to Play through Flaming Pie was his Renaissance period overall.
Wow.
But the period going from Give My Regards to Broad Street into Press to Play into Flowers in the Dirt, he's looking for different producers to work with. He's not sure who he wants to work with, whether it's David Foster here or, there's a lot of different producers and engineers on Flowers in the Dirt, but yet the material is so strong. And then working with Elvis Costello, but
to be fair, Ken, he had an album rejected by Columbia, during that period that he worked on with David Foster. So it's a tough period, and the material wasn't always, that strong. Yeah. But life is like this. He just has more of this than most people.
Right.
That's true.
Those albums, for the most part, Press to Play through Flaming Pie, were brilliant. Off the Ground is very erratic.
Yeah.
But then if you add all the bonus tracks that we had from CD singles, it's brilliant stuff on Off the Ground too. So but that's like you said, Ken, that's the nature of all artists,
Cool.
What about you, Tom?
Well, I kind of, agree with Ken Womack a little bit about Sometime in New York City. I think some of it works and some of it don't work. I mean, as a style of music, I mean, the late '60s, early '70s, all that political music, was big, and Lennon was right in there, head first, and some of it worked in my opinion, some of it didn't. I think the singles worked very much, Power to the People and War is Over, Happy Christmas. But the album itself, I think, was loose. It wasn't really, I think it was kind of sloppy at times throughout the album. And it might have been too much. Maybe throw in a ballad, or, Luck of the Irish. I don't really consider that a ballad, but, Woman is the Nigger of the World might have been a little too much for that time. I mean, I don't knock the song. I think it's a good song, but I think it was maybe just a little too harsh for that time. But other than that, I think that's the only part in Lennon's career where I saw any kind of, low spot, in my opinion. So.
But in a way, I kind of find it interesting that he went with Elephant's Memory for that album.
Right.
He was looking for more of a garage sound, and not a slick produced album. It's completely different from Imagine in that regard.
Right.
So I love the fact that he took a detour there and did something different, whereas Mind Games is more a continuation of Imagine, as an album. But maybe, now Woman is the Nigger of the World is one of my favorite John Lennon songs.
Right.
I think that was one of the most brilliant of all the songs, especially working in the sax part in there with the orchestration. But maybe you feel that way, Tom. Could it be possibly because it was half Yoko?
No, not at all.
No. Okay.
No, not at all. I mean, as the years go on, I really appreciate more and more, the Yoko stuff. So that part didn't bother me. I mean, I would imagine that it probably bothered, the fans at the time. That Yoko was getting so much vocals on what we were supposed to have a John Lennon record, and then here's Yoko, taking half of the album, and maybe people were probably expecting, just to hear her wail throughout the album. And I think that's one of Yoko's downfalls was we had that, that screeching first and not her singing first, So I think people were kind of, maybe misled on that fact. But, it's, like I said, I mean, I think it's almost kind of like living in the material world, which, don't get me wrong, I think it's a great album, but, a lot of people think it's too preachy,
Right.
And then with, but with sometime in New York City, I think it's just, a little too much, statement song or political song or, whatever. So.
Right.
Well, I think what's sort of the case with just sort of taking off where you left off, Ken, about the period in the 80s, the mid 80s, where Paul was sort of trying. He had the album Rejected. He was working with different producers and that kind of stuff. I think that's the thing. I think all of them at one point or another got to a point in their careers where they thought, okay, am I going to keep doing the same thing, or am I going to, try and keep, well, not even just keep up, but I mean to sound more modern and incorporate it into my music without it sounding inauthentic, and
Right.
And that is hard. That is hard to do. And Paul, I think in the mid 80s, struggled with it a bit. Like Spies Like Us, that's become this hated single, which I don't hate.
Not by me.
Yeah,
No, not at all.
I don't hate it, but I mean, but a lot of people point to that. I think, you hear some of the outtakes of other stuff he did. And I mean, I think, he was just experimenting. He was trying to figure out where he fit in this, contemporary landscape. I think George went through that process, after going Troppo and taking that time off. Ringo, I mean, we talked about a little bit at the fest. He tried disco. I mean, he tried different things. And John wasn't, I guess you would say, Double Fantasy. I mean, reviews that came out for that at the time said, oh, it was capitalizing on the soft rock of the 80s, the soft sound. And I think it's aged a lot better since, but I think, but he was, accused of that for a while.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, with Double Fantasy, a lot of the reviews at the time were that Yoko's stuff was stronger than John's and sounded more modern, and with John was more a continuation of the same thing.
Right.
And I think we look back at John's songs at Double Fantasy now and look at them certainly like Woman and Watching the Wheels as real masterpieces. But, if you follow what John said right before he was murdered, he was into a lot of the music of the late 70s, whether it was Talking Heads, The Cars. He mentioned bands like those. You have no idea what direction John's music would have taken. The only thing we do know is Walking on Thin Ice, which he was involved with for Yoko's song. But it's really a shame that apart from losing this tremendously talented, one of the greatest songwriters ever, we really don't know where he would have gone musically.
Right.
You know, he could have gone in a lot of different directions.
Right. Yeah, and Paul could have.
He's pretty like Blondie, you know.
Sure, but there's a beautiful song. I'm sure you've heard the demo that he was working on about 15 days before he died, called "Help Me to Help Myself," which has a very interesting kind of almost gospelish tinge to it.
Right.
You know, with descending chords. It was quite beautiful. I was listening to it today, which is why I was thinking about it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just John at the piano doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the success of Spies Like Us, you know, the fact that it made it to the top 10, I think that kind of gave Paul maybe the confidence to, you know, go the way the production did for Press to Play. You know, even though that was, you know, the way he was kind of leaning towards anyways. But I, you know, press people are going to have their opinions of Press to Play, and that's fine. And, you know, it grew on me. It definitely grew on me. You know, I didn't really care for it at first, and there's still some tracks that I don't care for. But, you know, as we said throughout this episode, we definitely applaud the man for trying something different.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you never really ever see him put out an album of all one thing. Like, you'll never get an album of Talk More Talks.
Yeah.
You will get the ballad mixed in there and some rockers, you know. Well, once Paul becomes aware of this show, there's going to be more Talk More Talks, I'm sure of it.
Right.
But,
we're that influential.
Yeah.
What's happening?
And then we could also talk about most recently with Egypt Station, you know, working with Ryan Tedder, for one, which I thought was a great combination. I mean, Nothing for Free, which was one of the bonus tracks for the Target version, is one of the best songs on the album, and it sounds very contemporary to me.
My favorite.
Right.
Yeah.
Great song.
And I know a lot of people cut down "For You." I didn't like the gimmickry of "For You," but I like the melody, and I like the whole arrangement of it all. So, I like that he tries to, you know, to sound contemporary by working with some of the hot names of today, because they, you know, the thing is that no matter how contemporary Paul tries to sound, the top 40 stations of today are not going to play him.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's the greatest song, the greatest hook. It doesn't matter if he did a Band on the Run for 2019. Top 40 is not going to play Paul McCartney. And Nothing for Free by any other artist, the new artist of today, sounding just like that would be a hit, you know. But radio being what it is, caring more about their demographic audience and feeling that young people are not going to listen to a guy in his upper 70s in his latest album, you know, that's just the way that it is. But it works when he does work with these people.
Yep.
All right. Well,
we didn't talk about Kanye West, though. We didn't talk about Kanye West. How can you miss Kanye?
We'll do a 2000s episode down the road.
I could do a whole episode of Kanye, so let's get on that.
Okay.
Anyways,
I'm getting yelled at from the other room.
Oh,
okay. All right. Well, then, Ken Womack, why don't you lead us off on what you got coming up, and, you know, if you want people to get a hold of you to say hi, you know, what's going on in your world?
I'm heading to Washington, D.C. in a couple of days. Going to do a talk with our colleague Tom Kitts at Kramer's Books in D.C. and going to go to the Pop Culture Association. So I hope to see some of our listeners there. It's going to be a good time.
Cool. And for this show, Talk More Talk, you can email us at talkmoresolotalk@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter at TalkMoreTalk1, or you can reach us on our Facebook page. Like the Facebook page, and that's how you can see us live, and that's Talk More Talk. And Ken Michaels, how can people get a hold of you, and what do you got going on these days?
You can reach me by email, which is everylittlething@att.net. And, of course, there's my website, which is kenmichaelsradio.com. I want to mention two quick things here, because a few weeks ago, I did a very interesting interview with a guy named Mark Mann. Mark Mann has a long history in the music business, but he became friends with Jeff Lynne around the time of the Traveling Wilburys, and he had a background in audio technology and audio software, which led him, get this, folks, to do the cleaning up for the cassette demos of Free as a Bird and Real Love,
Wow.
to make it ready for Paul, George, and Ringo to overdub their parts.
Mhm.
And then from that, he worked on Jeff Lynne's the ELO album Zoom, where he witnessed there were 2 tracks with George on it, 2 tracks with Ringo. He got to work with them there. And then he also worked on the Brainwashed album and did the string arrangement for Mawa Blues, as well as for Rising Sun. And not only that, he played at the concert for George. He is the guy that you see that wears a hat. He does the guitar solo. He nails George Harrison's guitar solo on something. He's right behind Paul, as he's doing the guitar solo. And so he has this long history with the Beatles. And that interview can be found on my website on the interviews page 4 page. Talks all about all the things that I just mentioned. And he's got a new band out called Lefty and the Hat Man. They have a new CD out, and I'll be giving away copies soon on my website of that. But if you want to learn more about Mark Mann and all the work that he's done with the Beatles, it's there on the website. I also have a special contest, which is going on right now, to win this really nice book.
Great book.
Ringo Starr and the Beatles Beat. It's exploring Ringo's unique and innovative drumming with the Beatles, has notation for what he did as a drummer, also goes into detail about a lot of the percussion that was used on Beatles records, from hand claps to tambourine, all kinds of things. And you can win a copy of this book by going to my website in a special contest that lasts for a week. Details are right there on my homepage. And I also have a copy of the new Blu-ray, which you just got, Tom, of I Want to Hold Your Hand, which has just been reissued with bonus features. Nice. So that's all on my website, kenmichaelsradio.com.
It's a beautiful transfer, and the extras are great. There's a extra special feature with Steven Spielberg and the director Zemeckis. What's his name again?
Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah, Robert Zemeckis. Thank you. Having a little brain fart there. Kid O'Toole, what's going on in your world?
Deep Beatles and Deep Soul will be returning soon. Deep Soul, I am doing a series of columns on a posthumous Marvin Gaye release called You're the Man, which is an incredible album.
I almost bought that yesterday, actually.
Well, you can read all about it when I articles. And then the other one, I'm doing a series on demos and unreleased songs. So that will be returning. Both will be returning this week and starting these mini series. And other than that, you can just find me on Facebook or my website, kidotoole.com.
All right, cool. And then in my world and with the Two Legs world, we just posted an episode 2 weeks ago. We had on a special guest. His name is Sam Wiles. Sam is one of my competitors in the Paul McCartney podcast world. He does the very fun and really, it's really good Paul or Nothing. And he came on and we did an episode where we ranked all 11 of Paul's #1 singles between the US and the UK. If you want to know, head over to Podbean, type in Two Legs, and you can listen to it there. You can email me at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Two Legs on Facebook, and I'm on Facebook as well. And guys, another fun episode. You can find us on our YouTube channel, Talk More Talk. We're everywhere with Podbean, iTunes. Kit's trying to get us on every known outlet known to man, and she's almost there. Right, Kit?
Almost there.
Okay. Well, guys, again, thank you, everybody, for joining us. We've had another fun time. So, again, for Kid O'Toole, Ken Michaels, Kenneth Womack, I'm Tom Hunyady saying, where are you, my coochie coochie? Coochie coochie coo. So long, everyone.